Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new special edition of the eMLB Insider. We are going to be interviewing the brand new expansion team GMs fresh off of the expansion draft. They now have teams, they now have players to work with, and we're going to talk with them and find some little bits of insight as to what their strategies were, how their teams are looking, how confident they feel heading into their first ever season in the eMLB as brand new franchises. Myself, JR, and Tim are here along with Ken of the Expos and Attica of the Stags. How are you all doing tonight, gentlemen?
Doing great.
Doing great.
Don't everyone speak at once.
Doing pretty good.
We just went through 75 rounds. We're tired.
Yeah. I mean, apparently Attica got all the sleep he needed before the draft, so.
And I actually made it to at least this interview on time. The guys here can attest for me.
This is true. This is true. Ken was actually the one that was late, so. But enough. I know Attica. We've already caught enough flack for that, so that'll be the only time I mention that during our interview. But we did it.
Thank you.
5+ hours later, I'm gonna be having to cut that up into at least manageable videos for the YouTube side. So, but that was a lot of. That was about as long as the regular amateur draft, but we did it at one shot. How are y'all feeling after that? Both Ken and Attica.
I was completely wiped. I did not expect it intense and long. It was exhausting for sure.
I mean, the combination of my my sleep being interrupted. I'll shame myself one more time. And going through that arduous process. Afterwards, I had to take an Excedrin and a Ubrelvy, and I had to lay down for like an hour because I had a migraine that was just going to be chiseling through my brain. But afterwards, then I woke up to 12 DMs from different GMs saying like, "Hey, you want to talk about this guy that you picked up? This guy?"
I mean, to their defense, you did post a trade block when you went to go lie down.
Yeah, I mean, to that same point, it's like I already knew that I had had shot myself in one foot by for my attendance, and I shot myself in the other foot for taking Blake Snell.
All right, so why don't we talk about that for a second? Going a little bit deeper into your actual draft. What were your guys' strategy heading into the draft, and did it change at all during the draft as the picks started to go by?
Who do you want to start? Oh,
Doesn't
okay,
matter.
I guess I can go. So I'll say it was tough to have a real solid strategy. Just the time between protection lists and draft, and the state of my scout, and just having other things in my life. I didn't have like a cheat sheet. That would have made, I think, a lot less stressful if I had like a stacked rankings of each team, or just in general of each position, which is something that I started to build but never actually got to completion. So it really was like in between picks, figuring out who the next pick was based on the list that I had. I did make a short list in game. But my strategy really was I focused a lot on non-40 man guys. I have a lot of those. I did want to not take very many, if any, big albatross contracts. I did stick to that. I did end up taking Bellinger at one point. And just to find guys that have some combination of ratings and decent contracts. And I did stick to that pretty well. One of the limitations that I had was my scout. Most of my guys, I think Attica maybe did a little bit better job of getting some pre-scouting in. I had low confidence on most guys, if not all of them. So I actually ended up going back to OSA for a lot of ratings, which is not something that I generally stick to. But I know, I don't know I'm going to wait to see how, once my scout actually gets time with my guys, how those ratings change and see if there's some guys I regret. But overall strategy, I think I kind of stuck to what I had in mind going in. I just didn't have a lot of like names like I've got to get this guy at this position or from this team. I didn't really have that in place before the draft started.
Yeah, and at least whenever it comes to my side, I did have a couple of different names that I was targeting for, one reason or another. I know that I got flack and Unsundered's, his article recapping the draft, but I personally like taking Florial first, even though his average is not that great. His defense is good. His bat pops. His contract is a little bit high, but I still personally was going in with that number one pick, pretty much regardless. And then from that point, it was just kind of a combination of trying to get a little bit more offense in my lineup, defense behind my mound, and just as many arms as I could think of. And then from that point on, just kind of going with a strategy of not being married to the people that I select. Because, like, for example, the Nolan Arenado selection that I made, it was with a larger-ish contract, but that is the one player that most teams have been reaching out to me regarding, and I feel that I'm going to be able to net several pretty nice prospects in return for that. I'm currently talking with 3 or 4 teams still actively right now, trying to see like who could give me the best package in return. But really, that's about it. Defense, which is the reason why I ended up going with Guillermo, Florial, and your Melendez.
Yeah, it's funny from my perspective, and I think we talked about it a little bit on Kamish's preview stream about how much we felt like potentially your divisions were going to play into what your strategy might be in terms of who you're going to go after and draft. And I know myself and some others felt like, Ken, you kind of coming in the Expos into the new NL East would potentially have an opportunity to compete a little bit earlier with that, really being the less strong division of the entire league now at this point, I think. And then, Attica going into the AL West, which we all view as just totally stacked division that, you might have more of that kind of long-term view to it. But looking at the picks, I almost feel like that was kind of reversed in terms of, some of the guys that you went after. And so I'm just kind of curious, and, Attica, maybe if you want to go first, how much thought did you give to the division you were going into in kind of developing your strategy, or maybe not really at all?
Not that much, because the more that I thought about it, the more that I realized that I am going to be playing these teams more regularly than everybody else, but given that we're still going to be having a schedule that is going to be a lot more interleague based, we're not going to be stuck in just the American League, just the National League. We are still going to be playing, other leagues to a degree. So at that point, it wasn't really so much of the fact that I was going to be thinking like, okay, I'm going to be taking on these powerhouses constantly. What am I going to do about it? Kind of just went in just thinking of a particular game plan, what I want my team to really be. And for me, with Portland Diamond Ballpark, my custom stadium that is very, very pitcher neutral. So very neutral, but kind of on the side of pitching. So I was going a little bit more defense heavy and a little bit more pitching heavy. And that's at least was my focus going in. And whenever it came to the bigger names, like I mentioned just beforehand, I wasn't really thinking of going for any of these bigger names, thinking like, initially in the chat, I was saying like, here comes the butts and seats pick, which to a degree it kind of is. If I end up with these people, then that will be the case. But a lot of them I picked with the anticipation that people were going to want these players. And if I am going to be able to move them, then I'll be able to start having start planning for a future a lot faster, rather than just waiting for the amateur draft or drafts.
Cam, what about you? Did your division have any impact on your drafting strategy?
It really did not. I kind of approach it where I want to build my organization as strong as I can, and I wasn't necessarily thinking I need that like guys that are contributors this year. Certainly if I drafted slightly differently or did do different things in free agency, I maybe could compete for an NL East. But my goal really was on building the organization in the way that I wanted to, and that was mostly on the younger side that had either shown potential in the past or at least had ratings that reflected some sort of future value, to try to build up from an organization standpoint. I really wasn't approaching it differently because of the division I was in. I probably, if I had been in Portland instead of Montreal, I would have had probably the exact same draft. Maybe a little bit more money since he got the 10 on the owner spending. I don't know.
When you guys looked at the folks who were off the protected lists on that Friday, any names jump out at you that you were like, wow, I didn't expect to have a chance at this person?
For me, there was. I'm trying to recall. Well, I mean, first of all, the biggest one that we've already touched upon, Nolan Arenado. I'm still trying to wrap my head around why he was left available. Because at least whenever it came to his contract, it was already partially retained. And even past that point, he is coming off of a 6-WAR season with 54 home runs. I don't really understand why he was left out. That's at least one that, jumps out of my memory.
Yeah, I mean, Arenado is one that I missed the boat on, because when I did my lists, I included contract value and time left in my player list, but that does not reflect retained money. And I did not look at his contract to realize that he was retained. Otherwise, I think Arenado probably should have been my number one pick. And that is something that I have regrets about. I was pleasantly surprised that Lux was available, but I know like actual production, he hasn't exactly been. He definitely didn't kill it last year, and even in general, he hasn't been showing what his OSA potential shows. The other one that when I first saw the list got me a little, I was shocked about, and it actually led me down the path of my OSA versus scout potential ratings. And that was, let me get his name, Gonzalo Henriquez out of Chicago. So my scout had him at a 43 current, 60 potential. And I watched the Saturday show, and nobody brought his name up as someone they were surprised was on the list. And I was like, that seems really weird. They brought up Joe Olney, who I ended up taking very early. And so that was when I went back and I looked at the scouting rating versus the OSA ratings and noticed the significant discrepancy as well as the low accuracy, and thought, you know what? They didn't talk about him. And I don't think Jake in Chicago is a dummy. So I'm guessing that this rating is probably not what my scout currently is showing. So I moved him significantly lower on my board. I had originally thought I was going to have to take him top 5 for sure. I'm glad I did that. I know his OSA rating is like 39-42 or something, but I figure if my scout sees something, maybe I'll give him a shot at the midpoint in the draft. But he was a name that stuck out early that actually led me down the realization that maybe I shouldn't just trust my low accuracy scout ratings.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, my scout has him a lot higher than OSA as well. So,
well, that's good.
Man.
So there's a chance.
Not saying my scout's better at it than yours is, but
Sure. Right.
We've all been led astray by our scouts.
I mean, but honestly, on the flip side of that, it's actually the reason why the first player that was taken off of my list was not only was a surprise that he was taken, but he was the first player, was your selection of Wally Oliver. For me, my scout had him a lot lower than OSA did, which is one of the reasons why I left him unprotected. I thought, well, maybe their scout would agree with my scout and that he's not as good as he's rated, but you chose him. What was that like? You chose it really early on. That was
like 3rd or 4th round.
4th round, yeah. I had 2 of my players taken back to back with Melendez and Oliver in the 4th round.
My scout had him at a 51, but and he was 22, not on the 40, so that's why I took him where I did. But yeah, and the OSA has him at a 59. Right. Yep. So that was an OSA rating pick, not my scout. My scout still likes him, but not to the degree that OSA does.
Yeah. So it just goes to show that if players are left unprotected, it could be because that team's scout had a different evaluation, right. And who knows what could happen with those players down the line.
With the conversation on Herriquez, I actually reached out to Jake, kind of like, I didn't want to reach out to somebody else and try to like go backdoor at better scouting, but I wanted to see if he would share an opinion. And he didn't give me all of the information that he had, but he was honest about why he left him unprotected. I told him it didn't really matter. I was going to take him regardless. It was just how high up my board I was going to have him. But yeah, it definitely, I think difference in scout rating. I mean, that's part of what makes this game fun, right? Is just the different scouts see players differently and makes for more trading possible, more sort of different valuation of player value. So I definitely, the having scouting accuracy fills me with some of the picks, but we'll see how.
Ken, I think
they're talking about White Sox folks that got picked. Migliazzo, that you picked Attica. I was kind of surprised when Jake left him off. Any thoughts? I mean, what came up when you saw him? How you felt about it? What you think his future is?
Well, it's kind of the same sort of thing that I was wondering, and I'm still kind of curious about whenever it comes to how our teams are going to be treated whenever the upcoming weeks are going to yield the Rule 5 draft. Obviously, we're trying to build for the future, and I don't really know what is going to happen whenever it comes to that. So I was trying to be very mindful of who my 40 or 40-ish was going to be. And then past that point, just trying to think of trying to select people that I thought looked attractive. and not enough to think like, okay, this person's going to be able to produce for me this year. So potentially not Rule 5 attractive in that regard. And at least whenever it came to him, it looked like that he had a lot of good upside. One of the things that I was trying to do whenever I was looking at different types of pitchers, at least in that regard, I was trying to keep myself to a rule of a movement floor of 10. And everything else, it's like some of his pitches were, I mean, his fastballs, plus. And then whenever it came to everything else, it was just like, okay, this is something that, if he can be an elite closer, or if he could be even an opener or something along those lines, then that would be very attractive to my team. If not this year, then 2028 or whatever the case may
be. One thing I thought, Ken, looking at the guys you went after, especially early, it felt to me like you definitely had a focus on trying to load up on some good young starting pitching and starting pitching that you could also slot in to the rotation right away. You picked up Gene Hughes, who was somebody I really liked heading in there, who I was really honestly shocked that a team like Minnesota would leave him available. You got Davy Garcia, more of a veteran guy to be in the rotation right now with, Matt McClendon. And then some of those other young arms, Olney, who you had mentioned, and Pedro Dyer from Texas, even Jameer Pennant from Seattle, I really liked looking at the draft beforehand. Was that a concerted effort for your part? And do you feel like what you picked up in the expansion draft, do you feel like you have, your 2027 rotation there? Or do you still feel like you're going to look to add to fill the big league rotation?
So it definitely was a concerted effort. I felt like starting pitching was the shallowest with some decent young names that I thought I could grab as maybe potential starters. I think I have at least 4 spots that I'm pretty comfortable with, and there's a couple of younger guys that I think would be okay taking the 5th spot, but I wouldn't mind keeping down for a year to get them another year in the minors, or at least sometime in the minors this year to make sure that they're pitching well. So I'm not opposed to adding another starter in free agency to sort of fill the rotation out. But I think I could fill a 2027 rotation if I can't find something in free agency with the guys that I got. And, I feel pretty good. I don't have an ace, right? But I feel pretty decent about what I could put out there in 2028 as far as a rotation goes.
I mean, I'd say more than half the teams in the league don't have an ace because there are a lot of teams that have 2 aces or even 3 if you're looking at San Francisco.
I will say, Attica mentioned, you guys were talking about Magliazzo. That was one of the guys so the other thing that happened to me, can you guys hear me still? All right.
Yeah, we can hear you.
The other thing that happened to me was the night before when I realized my OSA scouting discrepancy. I went back through all of the protected lists and added OSA guys that OSA liked that my scout did not to my short list. And then I woke up on Sunday morning and my computer was not behaving well and I had to restart and I lost that work. So I still had my short list from my scouting guys, but my OSA discrepancy guys had fallen off the list. And I got through the AL, I got through maybe like half the teams, but I didn't get everyone back on the list. So I'm sure that there are some names. And Magliazzo was actually one that OSA liked a lot, that my scout did not like a lot. So he might have been a little bit higher on my board, but that was something that, I mean, I didn't oversleep, but I did have some stress Sunday morning as I was going through my list and trying to redo work that I had done the night before.
I promise.
So what I'm hearing is
wouldn't bring
both
it up.
war rooms had chaos. That's great.
Yes.
I promise I wouldn't bring it up. I had nothing to do with everyone else bringing it up. So
That's fair. It's fair. Everybody gets one.
all right. So looking forward to next year, because obviously we still have a full free agency period. Are there players that you guys, obviously you don't want to share who you're going after because you don't want to tip your hand, but do you have a strategy going into free agency? Are you looking to add guys that will make you competitive this year? Are you looking for more minor league contract guys? What is your strategy going into free agency, as now you're going to have to compete with all of the other 30 teams in the league?
Yeah, I mean, I wish that there were better talents available in free agency that
I think everyone wishes that.
that didn't have compensation picks assigned to them, because having the number 1 or 2 pick, not really crazy about that idea. But I mean, I probably wasn't going after the top guys anyway. But I am interested in filling out the roster this year and trying to make the team as competitive as they can be. But obviously, minor league free agents are going to be a big part of our free agency push as well, since we have 75 players and have more than that, significantly more spots to fill in our organization. So definitely going to be perusing the minor league contract offers. But I definitely am interested in adding, I could see myself adding at least 2 starters with bats and maybe 1 starting pitcher. And then, we'll see how the asking prices go. But I do have some money to spend. Not overwhelming amount, but I have some flexibility there to go after a few starters.
Yeah, at least in my situation, obviously, I'm trying to move some of my guys, because at the moment, even though I have cash in hand, I don't have money for free agency as it sits right now. And I believe with at least a couple of the moves that I already have confirmed, it still needs to be approved on Kamish's side, will help. But like Ken said, even just looking at my other lower levels, like for example, my AAA roster is missing a backup catcher, a second baseman, a third baseman, a backup infielder, etc. And those are going to be people that I'm going to try and, find, if only just to try and make sure that I have a AAA team that will be able to play a game. Because if I can't play a game, then obviously they're not going to develop at all. That will definitely be a problem. And the thing that I had been trying to determine, which I've been getting varying answers, is whether or not I'm going to need an A+ team, an A team. Obviously not a rookie team, because we don't have an amateur draft under our belts. But if we're going to be going to or expected to fill out our A+ or A rosters, then that's at least another 50 guys that we're going to be looking for, and they're almost certainly not going to be good. They'll just be bodies, and maybe 1 or 2 of them will yield something from it, but it almost certainly will just be like a ghost roster of sorts. I don't know if any of you have any insights, because that's more of a question than anything. But I'm not 100% sure.
I assumed that we would have to field all of our minor league teams. That's why I thought much of there were going to be a good number of minor league free agent offers going out for guys that didn't have any asking price. But I guess that could be incorrect. But I was under the assumption that, especially because like the age restrictions aren't so bad for the A ball is 26, so we should be able to at least fill out rosters with low potential guys and put a team out there.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
And
honestly, sorry, go ahead, Tim.
No, I was going to say, and with the cleaning up of the minor leagues, a lot of some of us who had like 5 and 6 A-ball teams, that's a ton of guys that are going to be looking for work, so that there'll definitely be players available.
Yeah, there'll be a million of them out there.
I mean, I was about to say I'm one of the teams that have a lot of minor league teams, but the problem is those guys that are going to be dumped off, they're going to be like Attica said, they're 2020 guys who are just there to fill a roster. And it shouldn't be difficult to fill that roster out with 2020 guys because honestly, you're just trying, like you said, Attica, trying to fill the team so you can develop the players that you want to develop. And once you get a couple of drafts under your belt, then the quality of the rookie league and the low A ball will start to grow. So, and it's not like there's anything really at stake for losing rookie ball championships anyway. So you're just there to start people out on their journey to make it to the majors and start getting some playing time.
So Ken, do you think how do you think your experience as the Twins GM ahead of this helped you prep to run an expansion team, or did it?
I mean, I'm in a couple of online leagues. I don't know that anything particular, other than having a little bit more familiarity with some of the names, specifically with the Twins guys, but maybe a couple other names in the mix that I was aware of. I don't know that there was anything specifically with that organization that sort of helped me from an expansion perspective. I did briefly run a quick start and do an expansion draft on my own, just to kind of see how the mech worked and kind of see what kind of team I could put together with similar restrictions. But as far as the GM of the Twins, I don't know that anything. I will say, I signed Luis Guillorme when I was I signed him last offseason, and I didn't hate the contract, and he's relatively cheap, and like Attica mentioned, he's defense first, but I wasn't going to pick him very early in the draft just because I know he was not overly productive for me when I was with the Twins. So I maybe had some like preconceived perceptions of a few guys, but nothing significant.
I mean, the first player in your organization was one of your former Twins, and Evan White.
Yes. Yeah. That was, I had some assumptions with the level of talent that was going to be available in the expansion draft, which I think was pretty accurate. I felt like, Evan White, he didn't perform up to what I had hoped he would do for me in Minnesota, but he was serviceable, and he's got a great glove. Not that first base is a defense priority position, but I thought he was a worthy gamble. Even he cost me $8 million this year. He's maybe not worth that based on WAR to dollar amount calculations or whatever. But I thought he was a decent ad given what my team would end up looking like following the expansion draft.
Attica, as you kind of take a look at the team that you end up with here after the expansion draft, I know we talked with Ken a little bit about his starting pitching and his rotation heading into this year. For you on the hitting side, how do you feel about the lineup you could potentially field this next year? Are there any specific holes you still want to try to address for this season, or are there any kind of aspects of it you feel like ended up pretty strong for you that you feel pretty confident in?
Defense-wise, I feel that I'm pretty well set. One of the things that I wanted to make sure of, and to Ken's point, I tried to go in with a mindset that I wanted to get my defense settled kind of up the middle first. Hence the Florial, Garame, Melendez selections. Even as far as like tank with my backup catcher. Past that point, it kind of turned into what was there. Not really anything else that I had any real mindfulness of. I will say to, again, just to refer to Unsundered's point, not to, tip my hat or show my cards a little bit, although at this point it's not really that big of a deal. But I did have a discussion with a GM before the draft.
Yeah,
and I had agreed to draft someone for them, and we had a little bit of a prospect package lined up. So I am taking care of a little bit of salary from their side, and I'm going to be receiving a handful of prospects in return.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting that Unsundered kind of hit that nail right on the head.
Yep. But really, past that point, there's a handful of people that I had selected that I feel is going to actually be kind of helpful moving forward. Like, for example, I have at least a backup first baseman in Toke. I have several different outfielders, including one person that was from my organization that I'm still with. This is a little bit of an awkward situation in the one team Discord chat that I'm in, but with Tom and the Angels. And his team of other GMs, I ended up taking Brockhouse, who's a pretty interesting guy. Still on a minor league contract. Age-wise, he's going to be needing a contract very, very soon. But he's, as far as I could tell from ratings and everything, a very good contact, but then caps out at gap and avoid Ks. So he's, as far as I could tell, going to be like an OBP princess.
Yeah, I thought outfield was one of the areas that you came out pretty strong in with Florial and Jamison Hanna, Connor Scott, Brockhouse, like you mentioned. Even Torkelson, as a guy who could play a little bit of corner outfield, if you need to float him out there. So I thought you ended up doing a really good job, there getting an outfield that, can definitely be competitive in our league right off the jump.
Yeah, I thought Torkelson was a good pick because in Arizona, the one thing he is manifold at is power, and a lot of it is really lost in Arizona with such a deep ballpark. And I hated to leave him unprotected, but at the same time, I didn't feel like I was going to get any value out of having him. I thought it was a good pick. I'm curious to see how he plays in Portland.
All right. Well, I think we need to, as we're starting to wrap things up here, the question of the day is, going into this 2027 season, I want you two to predict when your teams will first make the postseason.
I'll go with 2030.
I'll go with
Fourth year.
2032.
So, all right, I want to know the reasoning behind that answer, Attica, because that's your 6th season.
Far out,
think.
right? My reasoning is looking at what I have currently and knowing that I am going to need to either do a lot of trading or making very mindful amateur selections, potentially a lot more college picks in order to get talent up faster.
Mhm.
I don't see myself getting the talent needed to surpass the Angels and the Astros and now the Mariners ahead of me.
Hey, there could still be 4 teams from the same division making the playoffs. You never know.
It's true.
And 5.
And things change so quickly in this. I mean, even since the last couple of years that I've been watching, teams have kind of gone up and down, and it's just kind of a surprise. And the talent level stayed fairly constant. It's just everybody is so competitive. It's kind of a crapshoot. I mean, the difference between 70 wins and 90 wins is a little bit of luck and somebody getting on a hot streak.
Yeah, but at least with this too, I will say, at least with people who have been reaching out to me, including those 3, I have had the opportunity of looking at their depth in their organization, and it's scary.
I really think, Ken's prediction of 2030. I think by 2029, 2030, Ken's team could be in a really, really great position because, we talked about the starting pitching earlier, but I thought, you identified a lot of really good, talented hitters that are kind of on the cusp too, with Roy Stewart and Joe Lynch. I really like Joe Lynch a lot. I think he's going to turn out to be a really good hitter. And I think you could see a lot of those guys kind of hit their stride at the majors, potentially at the right time, at the same time as the pitching. Whereas I think, to your point, Attica, you're still a little bit more of a wild card right now, just because you do have some of those veteran players that, you're potentially looking at flipping and trading for prospects. So, kind of until we see a little bit more of your story with that team and kind of what you're going to do with those assets, it does make it a little more difficult, I think, even for you internally to judge, where you're going to end up. But, it's really fascinating, the idea of building these teams up from scratch and kind of seeing, what you can envision for them a couple seasons down the way.
I'll make my playoff question a little bit more interesting, and I'm going to go one at a time. Ken, who makes the playoffs first, you or the Marlins?
How did the Marlins do last year? I don't even know where they sit.
Let's just say I'm going to ask the same question to Attica, but it's the worst in the AL.
I was going to say, I had a presumption.
So while Ken's thinking, Attica, you or the A's first make the playoffs.
The A's don't even have a GM right now. I feel like Attica's got a leg up there.
I was going to say, are we talking about long term or are we talking current?
Who, as the teams stand right now, which of you two will make the playoffs first as we go along?
For me, I'm going to.
This isn't being recorded or anything.
I think. I mean,
bulletin board material, baby.
like Miami. They've got some young. They've got a couple of very well decked out CCPs. I don't know on the pitching side how they are, but they've got superstars in Miami currently, or superstars to be, with Reddit, Luke Leto, and Eric Foncola. So I'm going to say I think they're in a little bit better position if they can get some pitching. to make it maybe before Montreal gets their crap together and makes it in.
So you heard it here first. The Marlins are going to make the playoffs before 2030.
Yes.
My money's on Ken.
I'm thinking about that. What was that? Sequest. It was an old TV show years ago, and they had a Miami Marlins. I think it was like 2018 World Champion thing because it was set in the future.
Right.
Like when they had first, always remembered that. So now we have to print playoff tickets.
Or like the Back to the Future where it had the Cubs winning the World Series.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will say, I mean, the Marlins, man, they have had some tough times.
But they put
except in Back to the Future, they beat who? The Florida Gators or something like that.
Yeah, some Florida team that was made up.
I will take the flip. I think I'm going to make it the playoffs before Oakland.
All right, so you also heard it here first. Oakland will not be making the playoffs through 2032. All right, JR, Tim, any other questions for our esteemed expansion GMs?
How closely are you looking at the CCP boards as guys are getting created and things are coming out?
Ooh, yeah, the draft board.
Yeah. And I know you're still recovering from Sunday's draft. I get
For
it.
sure. I mean, that is something I think I learned. So when I was in Minnesota, I did not draft. I don't think I took any CCPs in the draft. I felt like there was a little bit of a overweight on the CCPs, and I did not have a good running list of like who the active guys were that I really should move up my list. So I ended up kind of taking that market inefficiency and Minnesota's got a pretty good farm right now. So that is something I need to be more tuned into, especially having top pick to figure out if there is going to be a CCP near the top of the board that's worth taking over what the game's going to give us as far as those top level prospects. And then again, in the second round and third round, there's opportunity there. So that's definitely something I'm going to try to pay a little bit more attention to. I do think the days of Danny Smith Jr. and Jandy Ronson are past, right? So it's not the shoe-in that it maybe was for a little bit there, but there's still certainly opportunity there. But I don't have any names or written down yet.
So as for me, I actually took I don't want to say advice, but I took a comment that was made while I was in voice chat a month or so ago. And from that, whenever I've been going into streams and, exclamation point boss and heist and FFA and everything else, and listening to the streams and trying to clip whenever I can and everything else, I'm trying to also pay attention to who's there, who's gifting, who's subbing, and I have a spreadsheet that's about a month deep, maybe 2 months deep, where I'm trying to track the guys who are going to be, most likely to have these, bigger than life CCPs down the road. So if a CCP does get created by one of these larger than life type people, then I'm going to have my eye on them. At least similarly, of course, if there is an outlier that's, an eMLB 1.0 legend, which I still need to educate myself on, but as well as just naturally made within the draft, I'll weigh my options there as far as number one pick and so on.
There were a lot of 1.0 guys taken by the two of you. You just said something, Attica, that makes me think that wasn't really intentional on your part. Ken, was that feeling
It
the
was
same?
not. I didn't. So in the lack of um, formal listing, I did not get into the player history when I was looking at him. I was really looking at ratings, age, 40-man contract, and some at performance too. Now, like obviously I wasn't getting high ratings and high performance. Those guys weren't going to be left unprotected. But I did not go into history to like figure out who the 1.0 guys. I kind of thought that was a nice surprise during the draft, was to have some of that 1.0 history for Commish to talk about while we were trying to figure out who we were going to take next. I was not. I did not realize how many 1.0 guys were available.
Yeah. I mean, you had 48 whole hours. You didn't memorize the entire list. That's wow.
Guys, you step up your game.
I know.
I don't. Jeez, I don't know how you keep track of some of it anyway. It's amazing.
Yeah,
I think you
it's
guys
funny
both
too
did
that.
amazing.
Well, thank you. I think it's funny that whenever the export became available, that was right whenever I was streaming D&D on my Twitch channel, and I ended up making a comment in Discord or something, and somebody had popped in saying, "Oh, well, I'll make a list for you." That never happened. So I ended up going through that night, going into the next day, going out to lunch with my wife, coming back, and I think I had probably a good 6 hours of just crunch time, and then not enough sleep, and then the draft happened,
and then more sleep,
and then more.
And
sleep is for the
meds.
weak, and I'm so very, very weak.
I'm with you on the weak part. I like my sleep too.
All right, I'm gonna flip the script here. Do you guys have any questions for us about honestly anything within the eMLB, whether it be our own teams or the league as a whole? Do you have any interview questions for us?
Yeah, I mean, I floated the one in our Discord. I'd like to know who you guys would have selected number one overall, and then maybe who you like best and worst pick from each of us. I was true when I posted with I wanted to hear some criticism, to hear some conflicting ideas about how other folks would have shaped their team. So any of that would be welcomed as well.
All right, I actually have the answer to both of those questions.
Okay, perfect.
The person I would have taken first overall, and you kind of mentioned earlier as something you regretted, Ken, is Nolan Arenado. Seeing the fact that Chicago is retaining 45% of that contract makes that a lot more bearable for an expansion team. Just over 20 mil per season for, I think, 3 years. That's honestly pretty manageable for a player coming off his career high in home runs and someone who is a Gold Glove defender at third base. I think that's who I would have taken first overall. And then the player I don't agree with, I'll be honest, I don't. That contract of Blake Snell is an albatross. If there was any retention on that, I would have considered it. Like, he's not a bad player at all, but I think, especially when it's going to hit 40 mil at some point, that's going to be really difficult to stomach with someone with a team that's in the bottom half of the league in budget.
Who would you have taken second? I'm afraid Arenado might be the easy answer.
Right.
Honestly, I kind of expected Gavin Lux.
Yeah. Okay.
Honestly, if I would have had the first pick, I would have taken either Joe Olney or Gene Hughes. To be honest with you, I would have gone the young starting pitcher route rather than a veteran player.
Yeah, that's the same for me too. I liked the young pitchers in this. probably would have taken Olney more than Hughes, but either of those. I think the one that the big contracts were the ones I disagreed with. Snell is the obvious bullseye target there, but also Bellinger. And I get why both of you took them. I mean, it's a flyer plus, it weakens a competitor, quite frankly. So, this could be a little bit of a strategy there.
Can you say that when you took that contract off the books? Because now the
I know,
Dodgers have a ton of money to throw around in free agency.
And what did they do?
It sounds
free up DMAC, right?
Yeah, exactly. They're going to spend a lot on it. Plus, and they've still got more, I'm sure, that they can splash around the free agent market. But I mean, it just kind of hamstrings what you guys are trying to do. But I also, like I said, I get it.
I'll say
I probably would have pulled them both.
I had no intention of taking a contract like Bellinger. And then I just felt like at that point in the draft, the way my money was sitting, like I really had a lot of money. And, I thought I picked him right after Arenado went, and I was kicking myself. And the money is more than he's worth, but he also did hit, I think, like 44 home runs last year. When I look at my current lineup, I don't have a lot of home runs in my lineup outside of Bellinger currently. So, I felt like at that point I had a little money to burn, and I thought Bellinger at least had the potential to sort of step back up to what he was, which was still probably slightly overpaid at 30 mil, but someone that's putting up a few WAR and helping the team out. But I definitely understand the concern. And like I said, when I was originally going into the draft, I didn't think I was taking any of the 30 mil guys. So that one kind of was one of those spontaneous picks in the moment. But looking at the team, the way it's set up, I don't think I regret it. But I definitely understand the risk there.
I regret Snell.
Yeah.
I'll just say that.
That's fair.
He would have been there as late as Dodgers were available. I was not taking Snell. But yeah.
Because part of the reason why too, and I don't recall just how deep it was whenever it came to what teams still had players available at that point. But whenever I had said that I had shot myself in the foot, there was a player that I had my eyes on, and he was on the Dodgers. And whenever I went to go look for him, I realized that the Dodgers didn't have any more picks available, and I'm pretty sure that picking Snell was me shooting myself in the foot.
I think for me, if I was going to identify a couple of picks that maybe just for me were a little bit kind of head scratchers, a little bit was, I think for Montreal, Jacob Gonzalez, picking him that high, kind of as the second pick right after picking Gavin Lux. It felt like that was pretty high to select him there. There wasn't a whole lot that really stood out to me about him as an infielder. I mean, he definitely can play all over the infield, which is nice, but he seemed like a guy you could probably have gotten later or gotten somebody similar later in the draft. And then from the Portland side, I'm kind of like Andrew, like MJ Melendez. I don't really see it. I think he was probably, maybe the third best Cardinals catcher even that was available here. And, I'm glad Attica you ended up with Tank, because for me, I think Tank is the starter. I mean, I like him.
I was pretty pissed when you took Tank.
I mean,
hey, I got my next question. Go on.
I think Tank is absolutely your starter there. I liked him a whole lot. So, I'm glad for you that you ended up with him. And then I guess the other one would be kind of Michael Busch. Like when I first was starting to go over the unprotected list, he was a guy I thought, oh, Busch is out there. That might not be a bad pick. But then as I went through the rest of the teams, I just felt like there were so many other kind of first base types out there that you could get, without kind of paying that $12 million that he would be owed. And you even ended up with Torque and Toke. I don't know, they kind of go together, right?
Marketing.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So that was the other one that was kind of like, I think, that might have been something where, maybe looking back, you probably could have done without choosing him there. But again, those are small things.
Yeah,
All right, so
I somewhat regret that as well, just because of the fact that, like, I can't recall exactly what point in the draft it was, but I remember looking in chat and seeing, I think it was Cody, that was like, does he have 3 first basemen already? Or something along those lines?
Turning into the Orioles over here, collecting all the first basemen.
But if we've learned anything, it's like any contract can ultimately be dealt.
Oh yeah,
At some
yeah.
point. If there's
Well,
somebody that needs something, I think even Snell. I mean, you've got a team like in July or August who really needs another pitcher to compete. Somebody make an offer if they haven't already. So.
All right. So the question I thought of now: how many times did the other team snipe you right before you were going to take a player?
I was trying to think of that earlier.
Because Ken, you just mentioned Joseph Tank.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I will say I was pleasantly surprised. I felt like you kind of addressed it earlier, where I kind of attacked pitching and Attica did a good job going after outfield. I really felt like we were kind of working off of different lists almost, where I didn't feel like it happened a ton, but there were a few instances for sure. One was so when I took your other catcher,
Ivan Herrera.
Yeah, Ivan Herrera. I was looking at Herrera and Tank at that point. And I was like, well, Tank's got a lower rating. Like, maybe he'll stick around for a little bit. I'll take Herrera here and then hopefully pick Tank before Attica decides to go after a backup catcher. And then, like, right after I did that, someone in chat mentioned what's the $60 million man in LA? And Attica was like, spoiler alert, I'm taking an LA catcher next.
No.
So there were a couple other names, and that's not to say that Attica didn't take people that I was interested in, but it was very, and I think this has helped. The lack of the feeling is helped by the fact that I didn't have a master list that I was going down in order where I was like starting to get anticipation for names. It was really reactive to like what was available. So I didn't have a ton of times where that happened to me. I was interested in Toke, and then Foyston was one of the guys that I realized that I didn't have on my list because of OSA scouting discrepancy, but that was another name that I thought maybe I would have been interested in, but I really didn't feel sniped much at all, but I also could have just been so hyper focused on trying to figure out what I was doing next that I wasn't registering with me when it was happening.
I'm trying to look back, just trying to think of who I specifically had on my list. And I'm only seeing one that is popping out for me right now. And that is Dave Dodd. Just because I was looking for an arm that late.
Is that the one where we both put the name into chat at the same time?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I remember that.
Past that point, the easiest way to get the answer for that question is to look back at the VOD and look at every single time that I did a pirate.
All the times that you put in a player that was already drafted?
Yes.
Who was the one that you put in that not only were they already drafted, but you were the one that drafted them?
Yeah, it was the shortstop out of Colorado.
Yeah.
Casey or something.
Yeah, and
Team captain.
I'm not going to take full fault. Brendan spelled his name wrong.
Yeah, there you go.
So when you searched for it, it didn't pop up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That was like when we were on the preview show. I'm talking about Louis Urias, and Jamish is
You're
like
annoying.
thinking I'm saying
Yeah.
Louis
Yeah.
Louis Urias.
Arias versus Arias. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and plus, I mean, you guys are basically dealing with the equivalent of looking through the white pages, trying to pick players.
Man,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd
Well,
have to
I was
say.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ken.
What I did was during the draft, right? I had my eligible interested list, so I had gone through the teams, and that was where I wish I had some more OSA names on it. But I had made a short list of guys that I was interested in, and then I put a filter on it for another short list for drafted players, and I was actually like keeping up. So that was kind of how I was able to avoid the Pirates until the end. And that was the one that I did have in the 75th round. I had tried to go back to an OSA list for San Francisco, and I had it was there were guys that I knew were drafted that weren't on my list, so that I just tried to pick one. But that was my method for trying to stay away from making that mistake. And that's something I'd learned in a previous online regular draft as a way to sort of keep the list going, because finding stuff in Stats Plus isn't always easy either.
No. I'm not
Yeah,
looking forward to my
whenever it
first
came
draft.
to my problem through this process was all the time that I had available, since I didn't have the burden of managing another team or anything along those lines. What could I do? Was just try and plan and try and guess who was going to be available. I had lists upon lists upon lists. Like, I probably had a Google sheet that was probably 8 pages deep. That was like, this is from July, this is from August, this is from September. In case anybody's interested, the expansion draft and the last time whenever I was actually chosen to be this expansion team GM was back in June of 2022. So this has been an interesting half of a year. But really, whenever it came to that, I had a short list that I made the night before that was all of the unprotected people that I was interested in, or at least most interested in. And whenever I exhausted that list, then I just started scrambling, and I resorted to going into my OOTP filters. Greater than professional years for, and then just selecting different types of other filters that I was looking at. Like, who am I looking at right now? Maybe somebody with really high movement. Maybe somebody with really high contact. Maybe I'm looking for this type of pitcher. Maybe I'm looking for somebody younger. Let's make sure to look at, and all of my sheets were very informative. So I had like everything there at the same time. I can't show you my setup as far as like my computer is concerned, but I had so many things that were on that sheet that I unfull screened OOTP, and I stretched it across all of my monitors just so that I could see more columns.
Wow.
That's awesome.
So you really did have a war room. Wow, that's awesome.
All right. Well, I think we're over an hour at this point. I'm going to go ahead and say that we got a lot of insight from the two new expansion team GMs. We thank you guys so much for coming on and giving us some insight into your thoughts and how you went through the draft, how you plan on developing your teams for the future. And I think I can speak for all of us when I say I'm very excited to see how 2027 goes, not only for the expansion team, but for the league as a whole, as We are expanding the league to 32 teams. The divisions are realigned. The playoffs have expanded with even more playoff games. No more one-game wild card, thank goodness.
Yes.
And
We need a 3-game series between these two gentlemen right here to open the season. That's what I would
like an exhibition, spring training exhibition. Yeah, that'll be interesting. Well, we will see a 3-game series between them at some point during the season, and we definitely need to make sure we get that up on Game of the Night whenever you guys do face off. But I am looking forward to this next season for sure. We still have free agency to go, and then we're going to go into spring training. And as hinted by Attica, there could be a lot more trades on the horizon, maybe not just with the Stags, but with the league as a whole. As we fully dive into free agency, there's only been a couple of offers floated out there for now. So we'll see. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of changes before we hit the 2027 season, not just for the expansion teams, but for the league as a whole. But thank you again, Ken and Attica, for joining us. JR and Tim, thank you guys for helping lead the interviews as well. And for all of you guys watching, please make sure to like, subscribe, comment on the video. Who do you think is going to make the playoffs first between these two teams? Do you think they're going to do you think Ken's going to make a run in the NL East and overshadow JR's Reds? Do you think Attica can make any noise in the AL West? It'll be very interesting to see what these teams do moving forward. But until next time, take care, everyone, and have a great 2027 season.
Let's all send something to Commish to suggest that we do this every year and just pick, the 2 bottom teams in the league.
Let's not
see
turn
how
this
long
into
that
relegation.
takes to get shot down. Yeah, let's see how long it takes to get shot down.
Like a fantasy keeper league. You can pick like 5 keepers.
Right.
All right, you guys ready to get started? I said that like 5 minutes ago.
Let's do it.
Let's ride.
Oh man, come on! Keep bringing back the Joe's on the Pro stuff. Come on.